a culture change in New England. We break down the new coaching staff and what to expect here on Pat's Cast.
Welcome to Foxborough, where the cold winds bite.
Welcome to Pat's Cast. I'm Brad Whitaker. Good to be with you. I've said this many times on the podcast before. I even said it last year before the Patriots even hired Jerod Mayo as their next head coach. The baffling, oscillating decisions that NFL owners make where they cannot make up their minds between, do we want a player-friendly head coach or do we want a hard-nosed drill sergeant head coach? And it is a constant seesaw of decisions that these NFL owners make because they always overcorrect themselves when they make the wrong choice. And give credit to Robert Kraft for recognizing he made the wrong choice in hiring a player-friendly coach after just one season deciding to fire Jerod Mayo. It usually doesn't work out. Player-friendly coaches, it can work. There are some examples of it working, but for the most part, it's a failure. Antonio Pierce in Las Vegas this past season, essentially fired after 1 year. He took over midway through the season before. You had Dennis Allen in New Orleans. Raheem Morris was hired over Bill Belichick, partly because of Bill Belichick's personality. Now, Raheem Morris, if they don't start winning in Atlanta next season, they're probably going to be on the hot seat. I'm surprised he wasn't this year. And like I said, I'm not saying player-friendly coaches can't be successful, but they have to be real nerds to do it, right? Sean McVay, real nerd. Kyle Shanahan, certainly a nerd. Maybe Ben Johnson is that guy. DeMeco Ryans doesn't seem like a nerd, but clearly a guy, a very high IQ individual. DeMeco Ryans is. He kind of is a little bit of a nerd there. These are player-friendly coaches that have succeeded in recent years in the NFL. But for the most part, whenever owners decide to hire one of these coaches, it's because they got feedback from the players that they were upset that a coach was mean to them or was too assertive or what have you. And then it ends up being a colossal failure because the culture just dramatically breaks down the following season when they bring in these player-friendly coaches. And I think that's kind of what happened here with Jerod Mayo. After 20-plus years with Bill Belichick running a military-style system in New England, Robert Kraft wanted to shift to a player-friendly coach under Jerod Mayo. Now, like I said, credit to Kraft, he realized that wasn't going to work out faster than most owners do and moved on from Mayo right away. And now with the hirings of Mike Vrabel, Josh McDaniels, and Terrell Williams, the drill sergeant culture has returned to New England with a lot more youthful energy. I mean, you have to remember, Bill Belichick was kind of soft after Tom Brady left. Like, the culture was not the same. He was far more forgiving about players' off-the-field behavior and excuse-making and all that stuff. Even Belichick was making plenty of excuses at the podium, particularly that last 4-13 season in New England. I think we're going to see a real restoration to the Bill Belichick culture that we saw in New England in the early 2000s. And Vrabel, look, Vrabel's going to be able to connect with players a lot easier than Bill Belichick could, but he still is a challenging coach to play for with all that he demands. And the same thing can be said about all the coordinators that the Patriots just hired. But let's start with Vrabel. We'll go through these guys one by one. You have to remember Mike Vrabel. The reason he didn't get a head coaching job last year was for what I just described a minute ago. Teams didn't want to bring in a drill sergeant, an intimidating head coach. They wanted someone that the players could relate to more, be friendlier with. And that's why he didn't get a job after his shocking firing from Tennessee. And most people didn't see that coming last year. We know there was a bad relationship with the GM, with the owner, not happy about letting A.J. Brown go. Mike Vrabel wasn't. And that all factored into the decision-making there. But he was considered, a top 10, top 5 NFL coach when he got fired. And then he still didn't end up with a job last year. And Diana Russini had an interesting quote in The Athletic last year after Vrabel was not picked up as a head coach by any of the open jobs in the NFL last year. Russini wrote, "I had a GM at the Senior Bowl who mentioned to me Vrabel's physical build, that he's a very large human being and can be very intimidating to people in an organization that are going to be part of these decisions, and that is a factor." Well, now you see what happens when you move on from the drill sergeant head coach. Tennessee was an absolute disaster this season. They spent a ton of money on a ton of talent. People were criticizing the Patriots for not taking the same approach that Tennessee did and being aggressive with their dollars, bringing in top-tier free agents. They both were in a bidding war for Calvin Ridley. Well, it turns out the Tennessee Titans were essentially the same team as the Patriots. Very similar record. They now have the number one pick. So, I think they both ended up with the same record at 4-13. So, or were they 3-14? They might have been 3-14. That's why they leapfrogged the Patriots. But yeah, Tennessee was not any better. And the culture didn't get any better after Mike Vrabel left. And that's because it was a culture of accountability. As Rodney Harrison said, Mike Vrabel brings accountability to the New England Patriots as head coach. Mike Vrabel at his press conference, we're going to earn the right to be here every day. We're going to move entitlement from our football team. We're going to get everything that we've earned from the head coach to the position coaches all the way down to the players. Vrabel is going to be a tough coach, very demanding on his players with zero tolerance for players stepping out of line. And after what we experienced this past year with Jerod Mayo, they got the right head coach that's going to correct all of the things that deteriorated the culture throughout the season. And Vrabel, I think, was the right decision to hire there. And I'm glad he was hired over Ben Johnson. I know a lot of people are very excited about Johnson and what he brings to these new school NFL offenses. But we don't know what Johnson is. You know, maybe he is the next Sean McVay, but it's very possible that he's a one-and-done or a two-and-done head coach and is not able to be assertive and create a culture where the players are going to respect him. He might just try to be their friends. And as we've learned with all the teams, all the coaches that I just mentioned, it usually doesn't work out. I'm not saying Ben Johnson's going to be that guy, but there's a reason they went with Mike Vrabel and not another first-year head coach that isn't the most assertive, which I think Ben Johnson certainly fits that description. And then you have Josh McDaniels. We all know things did not end well when he was the head coach of Las Vegas because he was so demanding. NFLPA survey about Josh McDaniels. Head coach McDaniels is less likely to listen to his players and keeps them for longer hours than other head coaches around the league. Another anonymous player wrote, "No one was having fun." Another player, "I don't think he knew how unhappy and how miserable it was." Well, thankfully, Josh McDaniels is not a head coach anymore. Highly successful offensive coordinator in New England. Still very successful even after Tom Brady left with what he was able to salvage from Cam Newton, what he was able to turn Mac Jones into his rookie year. That was a competitive team. That was a playoff team. And they were competitive and in the playoff race up until the last week of the season with Cam Newton, who they lost to COVID at one point during that season. Perhaps they would have had a shot at the playoffs. It really is, especially in hindsight, impressive what Josh McDaniels did with what he had to work with after Tom Brady had left. And thankfully, he's not going to be a head coach because he doesn't seem to be a person who can establish and stick with a culture without his players turning on him. I don't think that's the case with Mike Vrabel, but I do trust Josh McDaniels to be the head coach of the offense and then have Mike Vrabel behind him for the demanding accountability stuff that is very important. Now, I think the biggest thing that's going on here is what's going to happen with the offense. Because as I've mentioned before, they have a roster filled with West Coast guys that they wanted to bring in to play with Alex Van Pelt or with Matt Patricia's new offense that never went anywhere. They also have old school Patriots guys that are still on the roster that are a better fit for Josh McDaniels' system the last time he was here. So it's really hard to know what Drake May in that offense is going to have to adjust to. But we do know one thing. Josh McDaniels is going to ask a lot more of his offense, particularly the quarterback, than Alex Van Pelt did. Maybe not the center, because the center is very important in that West Coast offense that Alex Van Pelt ran. Drake May is now going to have all those responsibilities added to his plate, in all likelihood, looking at the way Josh McDaniels has run his offenses in the past. They're going to have to switch from the West Coast system that Van Pelt was running to McDaniels' Perkins offense, or some sort of variation of that. You know, May's going to have to learn a new set of terminology and potentially more complex play calling. McDaniels may, for all we know, adapt aspects of the West Coast offense if he feels it benefits May and wants a little continuity there from year one to year two. But regardless, there's going to be a massive learning curve in understanding the specific playbook nuances that comes with having Josh McDaniels as your offensive coordinator. Alex Van Pelt, super cautious, overly cautious, in my opinion, at using Drake May's athleticism and mobility. May undoubtedly is going to see an increase in design run plays to him for RPOs, which would leverage his athleticism a lot more than he had this past season. This could mean more responsibility on May in deciding whether to hand the ball off or keep the ball based on defensive alignments. And then you look at the wide receiver positions. There's a lot of decision-making, split-second decision-making receivers have had to make in Josh McDaniels' offense that they didn't have to make in Alex Van Pelt. Van Pelt's, this is the play, this is the route I'm running, I'm doing that regardless. McDaniels, at least under Brady, especially the last few years where it got super complex as they continue to build up that offensive playbook with the same players, they have receivers running 2 to 3 routes depending on what they see from the defense post-snap. I'm not saying it's going to get that technical right away with Josh McDaniels, but that is a key part of his offense. And with guys like Kendrick Bourne, who I know has played with McDaniels before, so I guess it worked out, or Javon Baker, Jalen Polk, like that's another massive learning curve that they're going to have. And they weren't able to transcend their learning curves as rookie players. So ideally, they bring in some veteran receivers that have worked in these types of systems before. But there just aren't that many, maybe you can bring back a Jacoby Myers via trade, but he's never been more valuable than he is right now in Las Vegas, and you got Tom Brady there and his influence, Myers back in New England before. I don't see him going anywhere in all likelihood. I hope they trade for an A.J. Brown or sign a T. Higgins, but the offenses that they've worked in, even Vrabel was a little bit more West Coast when he was in Tennessee, and now he's working with McDaniels, who's not a West Coast guy, or wasn't before. Maybe he is now. I don't know what he's learned the past year. But even these veteran receivers like A.J. Brown or T. Higgins, they're going to have a lot to learn in this offense if it's the same offense that McDaniels ran in the past. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Then pre-snap, Van Pelt kept it super simple for Drake May, focusing on quick decisions rather than extensive pre-snap reads. As I mentioned, all the responsibilities that fall under the center in that West Coast offense, that's all now going to fall under Drake May. So this is really the biggest adjustment that Drake May in particular will have to make. Josh McDaniels requires quarterbacks to make pre-snap reads, adjustments at the line, call audibles. That was all a staple of his time with Tom Brady, and he did that with Mac Jones too. Mac Jones was able to pick it up pretty quickly, but this could slow down the pace of the game for Drake May, at least until he gets a little bit more comfortable. And then Van Pelt, who kind of gradually evolved the offense throughout the season, introduced a few more complexities, trying not to overwhelm Drake May. May's going to have to adapt to potentially learning a much larger playbook than Alex Van Pelt had. Alex Van Pelt, my biggest criticism of him, I think he made great early game scripts, great first half scripts, but when he had to pull from his toolkit and find something creative, he didn't have it there. Well, that's Josh McDaniels' greatest strength, and that comes from having a massive playbook that these guys have practiced over and over and over again. Drake May is going to have to learn that, and it's going to be tough for him to master a very comprehensive offensive scheme. Now, we saw Josh McDaniels was on Julian Edelman's podcast. He says, we fill you with information as large as your bucket can handle, and we'll give you a bigger bucket once you figure that out. I would expect him to gradually implement the complexities of the Josh McDaniels offense, especially with the players that he has, which, again, this roster is an absolute mess of players that fit very different systems. It could look very different by the time the NFL season begins in September. And then lastly, he's going to employ different protection schemes, possibly more varied, more aggressive, just to give Drake May more time in the pocket or to open up potential running lanes. That's going to be great. I mean, how many times were we frustrated with Alex Van Pelt and his refusal to put an extra tight end there to block? Or he did bring out an extra offensive lineman at times during the season, but then would abandon it against teams where you're like, this is the game to have an extra offensive lineman. Josh McDaniels is not going to mess with that stuff. If he's getting the same protection as the Patriots had last year, then he's going to make those adjustments and make the protection schemes a little bit easier for Drake May to work with, or at the very least, allow Drake May to have more time to make a decision to run the football if nobody's getting open. That's going to be a huge advantage in having Josh McDaniels. And look, I have no doubt Drake May can master Josh McDaniels' system, but I don't think it's going to be as fast as Mac Jones. We all know Mac has limitations. Noodle arm, hasn't been the best decision maker in the moment, but Mac Jones is a very, very, very smart person, and he was able to pick up on Josh McDaniels' offense at a rate that takes quarterbacks 2 to 3 seasons to pick up. And, you know, McDaniels was his first NFL system. He didn't get lost trying to learn something new his rookie season. Now, he did later under Matt Patricia and Bill O'Brien and in Jacksonville. He's been all over the place, so who knows where Mac Jones' head is at. But when this was the first system that he had to learn from as a rookie, and that was his sole focus, and Josh McDaniels did everything to try to make his life a lot easier, it worked out with Mac Jones. May's going to have a learning curve because, yeah, he may improve in his ability to retain knowledge because he's already had a year in the NFL, but there also may be some confusion because there's going to be major differences between Alex Van Pelt's system and Josh McDaniels' system. So I think we're going to have to be a little bit more patient with Drake May. Look, we know he's the future franchise quarterback. We know all the tools are there. He's going to start week 1, but there's going to be a lot for him to learn and a lot for him to unlearn from the first year with Alex Van Pelt because the responsibilities on his plate are going to be enormous. Just as they were for Tom Brady, for Cam Newton, and for Mac Jones his rookie year in New England. That was a big reason Mac Jones dropped off, by the way, because he really did kind of master the Josh McDaniels system, and then he entered year 2, and you had Matt Patricia trying to implement a system similar to Alex Van Pelt's, and Mac Jones was going, what the hell? You're taking all my responsibilities away. You're taking away my ability to adjust routes on the line or protections, make my job easier, make my life safer. And that was a big reason that Mac Jones really struggled because it got in his head and he wasn't able to make those adjustments. I think that would be a real advantage to Drake May once he figures out how to learn it. And I am encouraged that Drake May will be able to learn it, especially from that Hard Knocks clip with Drake May and Brian Daboll from the NFL Combine a year ago, where Daboll is essentially quizzing Drake May on all the stuff he taught him 2 minutes before, and Drake May retained all the knowledge immediately. So maybe he can pick it up as quickly as Mac Jones, but I know Mac Jones is not a great quarterback, and he's going to have trouble finding a job even as a backup this year, but he is a smart quarterback, and you have to remember, quarterbacks don't pick up Josh McDaniels' system that easily. Brian Hoyer has said that. It took him many years to pick up the system. It's going to take Drake May a little bit of time. So hopefully Josh McDaniels eases it in. You know, maybe he will incorporate some West Coast stuff. Maybe they're going to stick with the West Coast terminology, which McDaniels has never done. Who knows? A lot could change there, but Drake May has a lot of work ahead of him if he's going to pick up where he left off and learn this system. But if he does learn it, he's going to be in an incredible situation and have the opportunity in the next few years to become a top 5 NFL quarterback. So let's move on to the defensive coordinator signing, Terrell Williams. This is the biggest mystery among Patriots fans. We all don't know a ton about the guy. We know he was most recently the defensive line coach for the banged-up Detroit Lions defense, was also Vrabel's defensive line coach and an assistant head coach in Tennessee. From his time with the Titans, where he served in that role, Williams was quoted saying, "I like things violent. That's it. I'm not going to give you a dissertation about, hey, we have to do this. You got to play violent, and you got to play with effort." During media sessions with the Detroit Lions, Williams shared his coaching philosophy, emphasizing, "I've coached some of the most violent on-the-field players. I don't know any other way to explain it other than we're looking for violent players. That's just what it has to be." So the common theme here with Terrell Williams is violence. Okay, great. I still doesn't give me a ton, but yeah, he doesn't sound like a player-friendly coach. He sounds like a pretty hard-nosed, aggressive guy that's going to fit into Mike Vrabel's culture very well. And clearly, Vrabel's worked with him before, had him as his assistant head coach. So I don't think this guy is DeMarcus Covington, right? Like, I think he's going to hold his players accountable just off of these quotes alone. And, from what I've seen, what I've heard him say, Terrell Williams looks like he's a pretty good defensive coach. Now, things are going to be different in terms of his philosophy. DeMarcus Covington was part of a defense that really struggled with its identity all year long, particularly in stopping the run. Williams also has a background as a run game coordinator, so he's probably going to prioritize a more robust front against the run, potentially leading to a shift towards a more aggressive gap control type defense. And his experience with the Lions, they ranked very well in terms of run defense, so he has the blueprint for him to get there. Now, this will be the first time he's a defensive play caller. That's always a big question and something you never know. You say, look, I have a great coach that has an upward trajectory, but he's never called plays before. Well, we saw that with Alex Van Pelt. We saw that with DeMarcus Covington. So, who knows? Maybe it won't work out. Maybe it will. But Williams has a background in coaching 4-3 defenses where the front four are the primary pass rushers with 3 linebackers behind them. This is very different from what we've seen in New England for quite some time. We're used to the 3-4 defense that they've leaned on, at least in recent years. Uses 3 down linemen and 4 linebackers. So you can expect a shift where the emphasis is on having 4 defensive linemen, 2 defensive ends up front, defensive tackle and nose tackle, and then 2 or 3 linebackers behind them, depending on the situation. Now, this could mean a reevaluation of players like Jawan Bentley, who I think does fit pretty well there. He's going to be coming off an injury, was sorely missed all season long. The defense really dropped off once he left. So I think he might be a better fit for this. Jelani Tavai, on the other hand, I'm not sure. So again, these guys are going to be reevaluated to focus more on their run-stopping abilities and less coverage duty. And I think Bentley could be fine there. Jelani Tavai, on the other hand, he's not in good graces already with the way he talked about Patriots fans. He is under contract for quite a few years with a pretty decent cap hit from what I saw. Not the most expensive player, but I wouldn't be surprised if they move on from Jelani Tavai, but that cap hit might prevent them from doing it. But we could see them in kind of different roles this season from what we've seen Bentley and Tavai in the past, at least Tavai, and I'm not sure he's as good of a fit with Terrell Williams as he was with DeMarcus Covington, but that's going to be different. I'm not expecting many drastic changes to, coverage schemes, but the secondary probably going to be asked to play a lot more zone just to compensate for the fewer linebackers in coverage. For the most part, I'm a man guy in the NFL. I'm a zone guy in the NBA, but in the NFL, especially with the Patriots teams that I've seen over the years that have really good defensive backs that are very sticky. If you have good DBs like that, I lean toward the side of playing more man, but it's always a fine balance between how much zone you run, how much man. Patriots have been a far more effective man team in recent years than zone, but I think we're going to see a little bit more zone under Terrell Williams, so maybe that's fine, especially with the 4 men up front, but things are going to look a little different from what we've seen with essentially the Bill Belichick defense that's been run here for 20-plus years, even with Jerod Mayo as head coach. So Terrell Williams, I think he's the right cultural fit for what you're trying to do with Vrabel and McDaniels, but he is the biggest mystery. But as I've said before, I'm not as worried about him because now that you have Josh McDaniels on the offensive side of the football, he can control most of that. Mike Vrabel is going to be a lot more hands-on with the defense, so it's essentially Terrell Williams and Mike Vrabel as the defensive coordinators and Josh McDaniels as the offensive coordinator, and I think that's probably the best thing because you do have a defensive head coach, so the DC doesn't matter anywhere near as much. You have a very competent offensive coordinator. I think that was ultimately the right decision to bring him in. Bring in a guy that doesn't have quite as much experience in the DC role, but you really needed a guy with a ton of experience, which Josh McDaniels has at OC. Then there's also Jeremy Springer. He's returning as the special teams coordinator. He's definitely a player-friendly coach from what I've seen, but I don't think that matters quite as much with special teams. Special teams usually has very player-friendly coaches. But he did an excellent job this past season. The special teams unit went from bottom 5 to the second best unit in the NFL, at least according to Pro Football Focus. I really like Springer. Maybe he'll follow the John Harbaugh path of becoming a head coach. He spent 10 seasons as a special teams coordinator in Philly. John Harbaugh did, hired for the same role in Baltimore, and then was elevated to coach the same year. He went from a special teams coordinator to a head coach the same year. That's very unusual in the NFL. That's always been unusual. But Jeremy Springer's a bright guy, and hopefully he's in this role for years to come, but maybe he will have a head coach trajectory down the road. Just one of those young, bright NFL minds, and it's good that he's back on the coaching staff. I'm glad he's sticking around. Alex Van Pelt will not be sticking around. I don't think it's a huge surprise. You know, there was this idea that you bring in Josh McDaniels as the offensive coordinator, and then Alex Van Pelt, because he did such a great job coaching up Drake May, he moves to the QB coach position, but maybe they just wanted a fresh start. Also, Alex Van Pelt, for all the reasons I talked about, is not a great scheme fit with Josh McDaniels. They're going to want a QB coach in there and an offensive coordinator that's going to teach him to learn this system as quickly as possible. So I'm not that surprised to see Alex Van Pelt go. Clearly, they had those conversations, I'm sure, but it was ultimately decided to get a fresh start and to go with a guy that's going to work a little bit better in McDaniels' system. But overall, 3 tough-nosed coaches, Mike Vrabel, Josh McDaniels, and Terrell Williams. And this is the culture that New England needs. This organization will always fail if they try to cater as player-friendly. If players want a player-friendly culture, there are plenty of warm, comfortable destinations around the NFL. New England is cold, the fans are tough, the taxes suck. Players really need to want to be coached hard to come to a place like Foxborough. But the players that want that, those are the prototypes that lead to championship football. That's how it worked in New England for 20 years. You're never going to say, oh, this coach is really nice to his players. I'm going to go play in Foxborough, Massachusetts. It's not even in Boston. It's in a tiny suburb south of Boston. It's not an attractive destination to players that don't want to be coached hard. But players that do want to be coached hard, they're willing to overlook things like taxes or it's cold or I'm going to get tons of negative feedback from the fans. They want to go and they want to become the best possible football player they can be, and they want to win football games. And I think this coaching staff is the right start to restoring that culture, and I'm excited to see what happens. I early impressions, you know, we still have free agency to go through. We still have the draft. I think this team with this current roster should at the very least be able to win 7 games. With Mike Vrabel, they should be able to win some of those close games that they lost this past season. The in-game decisions are going to be some of the best in the NFL. That's what Mike Vrabel really excels at. I'm excited to see what happens, and if they have a good offseason, sky's the limit for this team. Not saying they're going to be Super Bowl contenders, but you can maybe get back there in a couple years. Look at the Washington Commanders. They did it in a year, and I think you're bringing in coaches that are the right cultural fit for New England. So it'll be fun to see. But that's it for this episode. Going to start going into some draft coverage in the next few weeks. Been resisting it because, I mean, we still have 3 months until the NFL draft, but things are heating up, and there's going to be a ton of coverage here on Pat's Cast. You're not going to want to miss it. You know, right now, Abdul Carter is the number 1 pick du jour, and is that going to change? Yeah, it's probably going to change 5 or 6 times, but I'm not very confident, as many people are, that Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders are going to both be picked in the top 3, and then you're going to have your choice of Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter. I'm really skeptical that's going to happen, and we're hearing reports, maybe Titans are throwing out smoke just to get teams thinking a little bit, but from some reports with the number 1 overall pick, they want to pick the best player possible, and on the draft boards, most do not have Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward there. They're somewhere in the lower top 10 or even between 10 and 20. Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter are in the top 2 on pretty much all of those boards. So there's no guarantee that quarterbacks are going to be taken in the top 3. And the Patriots might have some real tough decisions to make. But there's going to be plenty of time to talk about that over the next few weeks. You're not going to want to miss it. If you like this video and you're watching on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell. or subscribe if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and we'll see you very soon.
Welcome to Foxborough, where the cold winds bite. Vrabel's at the helm, leading the fight. No room for softness, no time for slack. The drill sergeant era, the Patriots are back. Josh McDaniels calling plays, laying it down. His system's tough, but it's built to astound. Drake May's got the arm, the speed, the will. He'll master this offense, he's born to thrill. Full metal Patriots, tough as steel. Grinding in the trenches, this is real. No player friendly, it's hard-nosed grit. Championship football, this is it. Vrabel's voice echoes, earn your right to stay. No entitlement here, just the Patriot way. McDaniels demands every ounce you can give. In his offensive system, you learn to live. Terrell Williams preaching, violence up front, the D-line shifting, it's a battle to the blunt. Four-man fronts, the gaps will close, opponents will fall when the defense rolls. Full metal Patriots, tough as steel, grinding in the trenches, this is real. No player friendly, it's hard-nosed grit. Championship football, this is it. The fans are brutal, the tax is high, but this is Foxborough where legends fly. No warm destinations, no sunny skies, just blood, sweat, and tears under Vrabel's eyes. Drake May's learning fast, adjusting to the grind.